Okay, we are. Before we dive into today's lesson, let me give you a quick recap of what we've looked at over the last couple of days, and it will be a very condensed recap. We've always started off with the top 10 addiction lists that we have in the UK today. Some of them are very obvious, and some of them are not so obvious. They're kind of hidden, like video games, sex addiction. These sort of things are almost accepted as like everyday part of life. But they're causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. We also looked at some statistics, and I'm not going to put them up there, but they are very, very concerning, especially about people that's happening in the UK now. We saw that nobody starts out to be an addict, but because of circumstances in their life, some of them end up becoming addicts. Some are up against it even before they're born, because their mum are maybe addicted to heroin, and so that travels right through the child, and the child ends up being born addicted to heroin. So some people can't help it. It's because of circumstances and things. We also saw that most addicts are addicts because it helps them change the way they feel. This is the bottom line. It's all about changing your mood, changing your mind, changing your environment by taking whatever it is, or being addicted to whatever, because it's almost like an escape to get out there and do whatever you need to do. We looked at the Greek word for addicted, and I'm not going to go into all them again. And finally, we looked at this passage. May the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, may your whole spirit, soul and body be preserved blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. And what we did, we broke that down, and we looked at what does it mean to be human. Because we're not just a bunch of chemicals. We're not just a body that's to be fed, or a machine that's to get fed and watered and lubricated every now and again. It says we've all got a spirit, soul and body. And we looked at that the spirit is the part of us that communicates with God. And when we die, the spirit goes back to God, because we won't need the spirit anymore, because we'll be at home with the Lord. We talked about the soul as who you are. It's the part of us that's going to be condemned either to hell or eternally with God. It's the soul that's going to go on and on, and the body is obviously the tent where the soul is encased. We'll go back to the dust of the earth. And so there's a lot more to being a human being than some people believe, and it was important to look at that, because if we don't get it, then there's no way we're going to help the addict get it. We need to get that. In the last lesson, we looked at how it's very important to look at addicts the way Jesus looks at addicts. You know, remember I put the pictures up here, and I'm like, what do you see? And everybody's like, addicts, 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 and addicts. And it's like, you need to see bypass that. You need to look beyond that and look at them like Jesus would look at them. Look at them as they could become instead of where they're at the moment. And so we went through that, and we went through scenarios of you're in your congregation one Sunday morning and an addict walks in. What do you do to help? And we went through those different things, and we saw very clearly that the first thing we have to do is, like James tells us in James 1:19, we need to listen. We need to listen to them. Not jump in there with book, chapter and verse and think that's going to cure them. Because they're not ready for that at that moment in time. So we need to listen to them. We also spoke about asking them the question that I had to ask myself many times. In John 5, when Jesus is speaking to the lame man, he's been lame for 38 years, and Jesus says, do you want to be made well? That's the question. If you take anything from these lessons, when it comes to helping people, take that question with you. Because they have to answer that. That's their part of the you can help in other ways, but they need to play their part. And they need to be constantly asking themselves that. And so they need to be looking to get well. And so we talked about how you can go along to support groups. Whether it's AA or Gamblers Anonymous or whatever it is. Go along with them, if you're permitted to, and get some insight to what they're going through. Get leaflets, look up on the internet, and you'll be amazed how much information you can get to actually help somebody. So it's all about setting up for the next meeting. And finally, we spoke about how we're all former addicts, all of us as Christians. 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, we're not going to read it all, but the emphasis is basically on that part there which is coming up when it says, some of you once lived this way. And we talked about, I could look at that list of sin in there, And I could pinpoint about 2 or 3 of my own. You know? And until we are honest with ourselves, that we too were former addicts, or enslaved, as the Bible uses the word for addict, we're never going to be able to help anybody. We need to look at ourselves healthfully and put our hands up and say, yeah, I was a former addict. And we talked about that passage, and we talked about other passages as well. Today, we're actually going to look at some addictions that are actually good for us. And we're going to see that those good addictions, or positive addictions, can help replace those negative ones. It's kind of like that we've already heard of this week, haven't we? With the guy who was demon possessed, and all the spirits were taken out, but he didn't fill his heart with anything else, and so they came back. And so again, we need to replace. And today is all about how do we go about doing that. And it's not as complicated as some people would like to think it can be, because we get very complicated, because we like things complicated. But it's fairly straightforward. Before we get on, let me tell you this story about this boy. He goes into the army surplus shop, and he's looking for these plastic explosives. And so he buys a bunch of them, and he wraps them around his body, and he walks into the school. And his friend says, "Why have you got plastic explosives wrapped around your body?" He says, "There's this one boy in school who keeps pushing me. If he pushes me today, he's going to blow his hand off."
He wasn't Irish, was he?
Now it's pretty obvious that little boy isn't thinking straight, is it? He's not thinking straight. But we need to remember that many addicts don't think straight. They don't think straight. They think they're hurting people around them sometimes, but they're very aware they're hurting people around them, but a lot of the time they're unaware that they're actually hurting themselves. They don't recognise that. So we need to try and help them with that side of it, and help them see the damage they're doing. And when a person has an addiction and they're trying to get help with it, one of the biggest problems they face is how do I go about getting that help? Like we talked about yesterday. And that's where you guys come in. You can help. Practically help. So, can the Bible really help with this situation? Can the Bible really, really help? Well, I think if we get through those steps like we talked about yesterday, where you're befriending them and you're getting involved in a decent relationship with them, I think that it can happen. And the only reason I'm saying I think is because everybody's different. Okay? What worked for me may not work for somebody else. It's all down to the person. Do I want to get well? And so we need to try and replace those negatives with positives, and that's what we're going to look at today. I know that this takes a long, long time, and this is where it gets frustrating for us. We look for quick fixes for everything in life now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, we're on the phone for a takeaway, as my wife will tell you. On the phone for takeaways. We want everything done yesterday. We want everything rapidly fast. When a person becomes a Christian, we want them to grow up as fast as we can, so they can become mature in things. Some things need to take the time. Addiction is one of those things that takes its time. You know, I know for me that even today, I still think about past addictions. Would you believe that? I spoke to Fuma about it not long ago. She's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." Today, 13 years later, I still wonder what it'd be like. Just one joint. I wonder what that would be like. 13 years later. Now, thankfully, you know, it's a lot easier to say no to that today than it was 13 years ago, because we've grown up a little bit, we've grown a little bit of wisdom, and all the silliness has gone a little bit. But it's all about taking one day at a time. And you need to take it one day at a time. This is how slow we are going here. One day at a time. Or, as a good friend once said to me, you need to keep it in the day. Keep it in the day. In other words, don't go worrying about getting through your addiction tomorrow. Just concentrate on getting through your addiction today. One day at a time. That's how slow we have to go. And we get help through those negative addictions daily when we go along and replace them with something on a daily basis. That's the way it has to work. So let me ask you this question. If we were talking about replacing negative addictions with positive addictions, what kind of things would you suggest that would be positive? A positive addiction. Yeah.
I've tried this, because I have an addiction to food, I'm sure. Searching, I need to search the scriptures and find scriptures that relate specifically to that.
Okay.
And I don't listen to the Holy Spirit, because as soon as I start to nibble what I'm not supposed to, He tells me. And I say, it doesn't matter. Or it tells me, that one bite won't matter. Then it becomes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bites.
Okay, so the scriptures could be a good source, a good addiction to look for that help, for that resource.
Yes.
Relationship with fellow Christians, and that passion that they have, that's I think probably as positive an influence as you can get when you're in one-on-one situations. And, I've been there, so I've seen it, and
Yep.
it's the perfect. I think it's the perfect way, because they're the example to you that you need, and they bring you along on a daily basis with that encouragement.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that yesterday in our session about, we've got a lot of former addicts within our congregations, and if anybody could really help an addict, it's a former addict.
Mm-hmm.
And if we would only just open our eyes up, be honest and say, I've had a problem before, I'm not talking about confession time on a great big massive scale, but I'm talking about, we need to hear testimonies now and again so that we can help and support people who want that help.
And just having someone that you can trust and go out for a walk with them, just being in an environment where you can actually be able to share whatever you need to share.
Yeah. So there's a lot of positive things around there, and what I'm trying to do with this, I'm trying to carry on from yesterday. The meetings, you've met up with them a few times, you've went along to AA meetings with them, you've sat and listened to how it helps, you've got the leaflets and all the information, and they're showing positive signs that they really want to get well. They've maybe fallen off the wagon, as they say, or they've ended up taking drugs again, and you think that's the end of it. Not necessarily. Sometimes people will fall and trip, but want to get back on the right side of things, if you want. And so I'm trying to take it from there, where you've got a non-Christian who's come to you, and within your congregation you're getting help, and they're keeping it one day at a time. But whatever the addiction is, it needs to be like this. It needs to be as follows. There's 4 of them here. There's something non-competitive that you choose to do, and you can devote an hour a day to do it. So whatever you're replacing, don't go jump in there and think I'm going to fill up 24 hours a day with absolutely everything. If you're talking about whatever it is, make sure it's not competition wise, but it's only an hour a day. Did you start to see how it's slow? One little piece at a time. Number 2, if it's possible for you to do it easily, and it doesn't take a great deal of mental effort to do it well. So basically whatever it is you're going to replace the negative with, make sure it's not going to be something that's going to squeak under stress. You want something you could easily do it, like you were talking about going for a walk type thing. Number 3, you can do it alone or really with others, but it doesn't depend upon others to do it. In other words, this is, do you want to get well? You have to be the one that's motivating it. You have to be the one who wants to go through it. And number 4, do you believe that it has some value, either physical, mental or spiritual, for you? Nobody likes doing something that's a waste of time, do they? But it's the same when we're putting those negative things to one side and trying to replace them with positive things. It needs to be something worthwhile for the addict, not for you, for them. Which again we'll talk about in a little bit. And so it's all about changing our daily routines on a daily basis. And it has to stay in the day. Or in the words of the Apostle Paul, that's not the words there, says, whatever things are true, whatever things are honourable, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is any praise, think about these things. In other words, when we were saying that to appeal to the addict, you need to appeal to the mind, not the heart. This thing here is just a pump, yeah? And the real mind is here. And so, and like we looked at in our very first session, addiction takes away their heart. It takes it away from God. And Paul is here like, no, I want you to think about God. I want you to think about godly things. And so you're going to have to start in the mind to replace those negative things with godly things, with good things, things that are positive, in other words. Where are we? Yeah. So we try and help see that we ourselves, even as Christians, are wanting to do God's will. Not just the addict. We need to be shown that example to let them see how important it is for them.
Yeah, when I look at that, I was doing something the other week, and you're talking about the heart, in Ecclesiastes, when we've all got eternity in the heart, and that shows that massive big void that's got to be filled with something. And even us now as non-Christians, we've still got to fill it with those positive influences. And so the addict's still got that huge big void that's got to be filled, the same as we've got to do.
Yep.
So
We just as an addict, you don't know that at the time.
yeah, exactly.
You feel, I am absolutely convinced one of the reasons there's so much drugs, alcohol, sexual improper behaviour, people having affairs. I believe that the reason all that stuff is there is because of people that are filling their lives with anything except God.
Yeah.
And they're trying to fill that gap, look for some purpose in life.
Yeah.
And I say that because I've been there in that sense. A young woman called Donna, she says, I worked in a chemical dependency program for 4 years and watched addict after addict try to pull their lives back together, only to find it's much harder than they thought they ever could imagine. No one wants to be a drug addict or alcoholic, but when we dabble in what God warns us against, the inevitable will happen. Our hearts will be taken away, changed, and by the time we come to the realisation of this, we are addicted and much damage has been done. That's exactly what we just said, isn't it? Our hearts will be taken away.
Yeah, in a situation where you've been walking with someone, basically I have no idea, which is why I'm enjoying this lesson. I can't even recognize any of the stuff like that. And then you are working with someone, you've agreed, and you take the person to the advisory center fortnightly, and you have a program that's run, and then suddenly there is relapse, and in that relapse there is denial, and coming to you telling you, I'm completely clean, I don't do drugs, I don't do alcohol, and they are on it. And it doesn't give me the ground to start from where we stopped again. How do I handle that kind of situation?
Again, like we talked about yesterday, they're the ones that are going through it, not you. And so if they fail, it's not a failure on your part. You've done what you can. And all you could do, and remember we talked about Lloyd's TSB for the journey? Yeah? So you need to be there for that journey. If you're committed to helping that person, you need to be there for that journey. But you can't walk that journey for them. They are going to fall. They will stumble. But you can't take that personally. You can't hold it against them and say, right, I'm not going to help you anymore. If you've made up your mind you want to help, then you'll be there for the journey. There's a difference between somebody who's deliberately just taking advantage of you and somebody who's genuinely trying. But they will fail. And you need to be realistic when we're helping people here. If you think you're just going to help them and the next day they're going to become clean and then we're going to touch anything again, we're living in dreamland. Like I was saying to you earlier, 13 years later I still think about these things. It doesn't go away. You learn to deal with it in a different way. So, we need to replace all those things like drinking and drugs and food and things like we were talking about with something more meaningful, with something more lasting, if you want. And so, for a lot of people, they need to realise that God can help, which again ties in with yesterday. If you're not convinced that God can help them, you're no way on earth you're going to convince the addict that God can help them. But we need to look at our own lives and remember where we've come from. Because like I said, nobody is born a Christian. We're born again Christians. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we've all got a past, we've all got a history, we've all got something there, and whether you were raised in the Lord's church or raised on the street, it makes no difference. We all had to come to a point in time where we had to meet Jesus our Lord, didn't we? So we're all singing off the same song sheet. And so when God finally takes over a person's life, things start to happen. The addict can now say what many Christians are saying: I've spent enough money in years reaching for tobacco, now I'm reaching for the future. Many addicts who are Christians are saying, I've reached for enough food now, I'm reaching for Jesus. I've lifted the glass enough, now I lift my hands and bless the Lord. I've stuck my finger down my throat for the last time, now I'm going to stick my finger in the devil's eye. From now on, the only shooting up I'm going to do is when the trumpet of God sounds and I go shooting up to heaven. You know, the mentality is brilliant, isn't it? The change is absolutely brilliant. So let's go ahead and look at some practical ways of replacing those negative things. Like we've said, whether it's smoking, swearing, drinking, gambling, all those sort of things. Because we need to remember that it becomes like second nature, whatever that addiction is. It becomes what some people would call a habit. You get into the habit of that. And so what we're trying to do, we're trying to change that habit. We're trying to change that mentality that many addicts have got. And so somebody who's got food problems, for example, like you were saying earlier, you know, what you could do is replace that by some regular exercise. Now you hear that, you know that. It's all the time, isn't it? You hear it everywhere. But what's happening here? Basically what's happening is that exercise becomes the positive addiction.
Yes.
That's what happens. And so you replace the negative with something positive. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science with some of this stuff. And so teaching people to pray to God, for example, helps them slow down and helps them in so many different ways, which we're going to look at in a little second. But those positive things need to be taking over. That's the whole point of this.
But there's also, you said, the addiction of exercise. That can be an addiction.
Yep.
And it can push Jesus out.
Yep.
I know people that on Facebook say, I ran 2 miles. Well, they have to go to church first. You know.
But that's again where it could become a problem.
Yes.
And I was kind of speak to somebody else earlier about that, where somebody's addicted to heroin and now they're on methadone, and it's like, yeah, this is replacement therapy. This is best. What you're actually doing is replacing one with just one which is as bad within all of that. So you need to be careful with some common sense with all of that. So number one, positive addiction number one is basically this: start each day in personal prayer and meditation, and you're going to notice that everything is on a daily basis here, okay? Has to be. Because anything longer than that, then you're going to lose people rapidly fast. This is a quiet time, if you want, for you to assess where your life is at. In life we all face difficulties, we all face challenges and affections and sorrows and all sorts of things. And we go to the doctor quite readily when we've got ailments. We go to numerous professionals when we've got other ailment problems or addiction problems. But for spiritual problems, there's only one place to go. And that's to God. That's to God in prayer. And maybe we could pray Psalm 139, verse 23 and 24, where he says, search me, God, and know my heart. Can you imagine praying that to the Lord? Scary, isn't it? You're like, whoa, God, do I really want you to look inside my heart? Well, scary place. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me and lead me in the everlasting way. And so that's a nice prayer to start your day off, because most addicts are so wrapped up with getting their fix every single day, so busy running around trying to get it, they never get a chance to stop. Never get a chance to reflect and think about anything. And what praying does, apart from teaching them to pray of God, of course, it helps them to stop. It helps them to slow down. It helps them to reflect on life a little bit. Because when you're an addict, your mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. It's thinking way ahead all the time. You know, I've got my fix for today, how am I going to get for tomorrow? If I get for tomorrow, how am I going to get for the next day? And this is the way your mind's racing all the time, thinking ahead. This prayer slows it right down. It helps them keep asking the question, do I want to get well? Do I want to get well? And it helps them realise that God can actually help them. I think it was C.S. Lewis who says, the moment you wake up each morning, all your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like wild animals. And if the first job each morning consists in shoving it all back and listening to that other voice, taking that other point of view, letting that other larger, stronger, quieter life come flowing in. True words, isn't it? To stop and start about your day. In fact, morning prayers are a bit like Mars bars. Yeah? And for those of you who are a little bit older than I am, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. Mars bars help you work, rest, and pray. Yeah? For those of you who remember that. First thing in the morning is the best time when your body is rested. It's the best time where it's going to be more rested than anything else, any other part of the day. First thing in the morning, whether we like it or not, even this, our mind is really sharp. First thing in the morning. And so we can reflect on the mistakes of yesterday, and we can understand that they're past. And just like Jeremiah, we can say what he says in Jeremiah Lamentations, verse 3, verse 21 to 24. Lord, in the morning, he says, you will hear me. In the morning, I will present my case to you, and then wait expectantly for an answer. So it's our morning prayers. And if we had a difficult time yesterday, we can say along with the psalmist in Psalm 30 verse 5, for his wrath is only temporary. Yet his favour is for a lifetime. Weeping may lodge for the night, but shouts of joy will come in the morning. Maybe we could pray like Job. In Job chapter 1 verse 5 it says, for his wrath is only... well, that's the one before, isn't it? Sorry. There we go. When the time of feasting had concluded, Job would rise early in the morning to send for them and consecrate them to God. And so, instead of getting up in the morning thinking, where's my coffee fix? We can sing songs in our hearts and sing the song of the psalmist in Psalm 118:24, when he said, this is a day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it. You see how everything gets taken from weeks ahead to one day at a time? You know, one thing I keep emphasising at Great Bar is your faith. Take it one day at a time. You cannot race with it and go too far ahead. At least you'll fall. So early in the morning is ideal time to start organising your day. So we start off each day with a prayer and medication. And if you're with the addict, you know, encourage them to do that. It doesn't have to be big, long-winded things, but encourage them to do that. Start replacing those negative thoughts with positive ones straight first thing in the morning. Second thing is to spend time learning. Now what do I mean by this? Well, basically, it's all about getting positive things in your mind through reading. Just through simple reading. It's a great way to fill your mind with good thoughts. It could be getting enrolled in the local library. We can get involved in reading some books. Or it could be study groups. Get your own books on mental health. These sort of things. If it's appropriate. Anything is going to help you grow your mind a little bit. Something is going to challenge you to learn. And again, we can encourage people to read their Bibles. If they've been through all the next stages with you, you've built up a reasonable good relationship, encourage them to read their Bibles on a daily basis. Because many people have tried to read their Bibles, haven't they? And they don't keep it up. And that's including Christians as well, isn't it? Yeah, they don't keep it up. And why is that? Because reading the Bible becomes a chore rather than a pleasure. And so you end up missing the Bible one day, your Bible reading one day, and you miss it another day, and another day, and the next thing you know, you just can't be bothered to pick it up again and start off where you left off. So how do we make reading the Bible a enjoyable experience rather than a chore? Well, if you think about a marathon runner, for example, they didn't start out by thinking, I'm going to start training tomorrow and I'm going to run 25 miles. A marathon runner doesn't do that. You have to take it slowly and build that mileage up, don't you?
Yeah, when you talk about the Bible reading thing, I thought, I was talking to Neil about it earlier on when I was going through my addictions and problems, was to look at passages that were relating to that specific period in time and the things that I was looking for in life. And then when you slowly start going through all those different things, it might be for hope, it might be for trust, whatever it be, the bigger picture starts building up.
Yep.
And then you get to the point where, it becomes more than just reading for pleasure. As exactly your life. And then you can start reading and getting in depth with
Yep.
things. And I think as long as you make it relational for whatever you're going through, then they will get that joy from it.
And I think I'm going to talk about that in a minute, because I think that's where we fail sometimes, because we're not very good at how do we do that, or how do we practical advice to go about reading our Bibles. Hebrews 5:14 says that solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. And notice that phrase, that solid food is for the mature. And how do they use it? They've trained themselves. And this is where many people go a little bit off the wall a little bit with their daily Bible reading. Because what they do is they try to read too much, too soon, and they can't digest what they're reading. Because they're young Christians, or they're not even Christians, and they've been told to go and read this. And so what people do, many addicts as well, they're like, I'm going to read the Bible, it's going to change my life. So what do? They start off in Genesis, and by the time they get to Leviticus, they're feeling sick. They can't get past it, they can't digest it. And that's what's happening. If we're going to encourage the addict or even each other to read the Bibles, let's be realistic. Let's get realistic with it. Let's get them to begin, at least in the New Testament. I know, for example, Josh, our son. If Josh isn't well, he doesn't eat. Okay? But if he's healthy, I don't have to coax him to eat. He will eat and eat and eat. And he will eat and he will let you know about it until you satisfy that sort of need in there. Now, an addict is only going to become a mature Christian over a period of time only if they learn to feed themselves. Then you might be thinking, how are they going to feed themselves? Well, what I'm trying to encourage them here is to try and feed that new nature so they get used to the old garbage that they used to take in. Let me give you an example, 1 second. We've all seen little children, haven't we? When they're a year or 2 years. Yep. Little kids. And there comes a point in time where babies or little children have to feed themselves. And so this is what's happening here. They learn to feed themselves. The food goes all over the hair, it goes all over the hands, it goes all over their face, it goes all over the floor, it goes all over mum and dad, all over the dog. The food goes absolutely everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they always manage to get a little food in here. Always. And so what we're trying to do here is that if we help the addict to feed themselves by starting off in the Gospels, for example, they may not understand it all, but a little good is going to get in. That's what we're saying here. A little good is going to get in if they get stuck right into their Bibles. And the more they do it, the more they will learn to do it. Like Psalm 110, 15, 16 says, I will meditate on your precepts and I will respect your ways. I am delighted with your statutes and will not forget your word. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit simple, but when they're doing that, I always find it important to give them an easy read Bible, because it breaks down and makes it far more simple.
Yeah.
And they get it rather than giving them text that they become a little bit more complicated with. I do think that's very, very important.
I think, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, okay, but I think it's almost humorous when you get somebody coming in to help out, or they're coming along to your worship meetings all the time, and you know they're maybe, I don't know, 19, 20 or something like that, and you give them a King James version in the Bible and say, go away and read that. And you're like, when even I can't get some of that stuff with the language. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, you know, but let's get real. If we want to help people, we need to speak a language that they understand at least. And so, give them a New Testament or something and help them to read that, because that's fairly straightforward. Ask them what they're reading. You know, if they've got questions, encourage them to write the questions down. Ask them if they understand what they're reading. So just basic stuff come along. Help them also to realise that it's not just about reading, but can you apply it to your life? It's just as important to do what you're reading. As James tells us in James 1, 22, 24, keep on being obedient to the word and not merely being hearers who deceive themselves, for if anyone hears the word but is not obedient to it, he's like a man who looks at himself in the mirror and studies himself carefully and then goes off and immediately forgets what he looks like. And so, if we're going to help the addict and they're getting to the point where they want to read the Bible for themselves, let's start them off how they're supposed to start off. Don't just give them it and say, okay, best of luck, we'll see you in a couple of weeks and let me know how you got on with it. You know, encourage them to read it. Encourage them to show them that it's one thing reading it, but it's another thing doing what it says. So if they can start off, even before they're Christians, to think that that's going to help them a long way in their Christian walk. And so we start off prayer and meditation, we spend time learning, and then number 3, spend time in groups. This could be where we come in so many different ways. Worship assemblies. Maybe they can go to the local theatre and get involved in acting. Just get them out, get them involved, get them mingling with other people. Because what this does is this heightens their ability to build relationships with those outside their circle of friends. You know, when I had my problems, one of the first things that came to my head and I knew how to do was leave my circle of friends. I make no mistake about it, you have to do it. And when you speak to people today and they're like, what do I have to do? You tell them, like, oh no, I'm not doing that. I'm like, well, you obviously don't want to get well. You have to get out of that cycle and those cycle of friends. And so, maybe they want to come along and worship. Maybe this is like we were talking about before, we go along to these support groups with them. Yeah, make sure they keep going to those sort of things. Encourage them to keep going. But we also need to remember that if we don't think we could help each other, the addict won't think that either. Hence the reason why it's important for us to meet together, isn't it? In the Hebrews passage, everybody knows it. Once again, in Hebrews 10, 24, 25, when he talks about our some are in the habit of doing, you know, the whole point of this is, if you're not excited about worship, you've got no chance about getting your addict to be excited about worship. Because, as somebody once says, bad habits are like comfortable beds. They're easy to get into, but they're hard to get out of. Somebody had their hand up somewhere. Yes,
Yeah, talking about circle of friends. I realize it's very important to disconnect the person from the old group. And someone that has been the person's lifestyle from 13 years. Mm-hmm. And then I had a talk with her family and talked about taking away her phone and giving her another SIM card. Somehow I ended up with a broken screen and she never let go the phone. So how do you handle that, when the person doesn't want to disconnect?
You don't. I know where you're at, okay? But what you need to remember is that they're the ones going through it. You're there on the sidelines supporting them. You're ready to catch them when they fall, encourage them when they're walking. But you can't put down the terms and conditions. You can advise. If they don't take that advice, that's up to them. And so if they want to hold on to the past, then they'll hold on to it until they're ready to let go of it. You can't force that. We can't force anybody to do anything. That becomes almost like a cult then when we start doing that sort of stuff.
Just on about groups, I set up a group for bereavement support, and it was amazing really, because when I asked this lady to come, who lost her husband, and when she walked in, we were sat round at a circle. Oh, she says, now the last thing I want is an AA meeting where we all, I am John Morgan and I'm,
Yep.
but it's amazing that lady walked out. She walked out and later phoned me and apologised for walking out. And I suggested that she came back because she had something to offer the group. So really, it's hanging in with it.
Yep.
And I find that the people who were reluctant to talk within a group soon find they're talking within a group.
Yep.
But it's hanging in with it. Yeah.
It's taking time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, these meetings are invaluable, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
They're absolutely invaluable. And so, whether we're meeting with the addict and we're trying to encourage them to come along to worship or come along to midweek studies, whatever it is, we need to be excited about it.
Yeah.
They need to know that there's something there for them that they're going to get out of it. I remember, one second, I think it was a few months ago now at Great Barn, a midweek Bible study, we had this drug addict who came in. We invited him to our Wednesday night study, and he came in. And we were looking at King David. So what we did, we changed our study programme slightly, because we knew he was coming. And so we talked about how God totally forgave King David of everything he'd done. Although he had to pay the consequences for his sin, but he forgave them. And this addict turned around, I'm sure you remember, he turned around and says, "Will God forgive me for 24 years of sin?" Yes, they were an addict. Yes, they had mental health issues, but they still understood that they needed forgiveness of their sins. And these sort of things can happen when they come along to our meetings. As long as whoever's taking the class can adapt it to suit the need for that person. And so the point I'm trying to make is this. It's that God can do things that we can't do. If we would let Him. If we would let Him. And so we encourage them to try and break that usual routine, that daily routine, with a more positive one. One second. Because you've got to remember that, like you were saying, they've been hanging out with these friends for years, and they're stuck in a rut. And it takes a long time to get out of there. In fact, in the US, in western US, many years ago, they had these things here, bus and carts, and before they had roads, basically. But these roads were so bad, or tracks as they call them, they were so bad that one of them, actually on a winding one, had this sign. It says, "Avoid this rut or you'll be in it for the next 25 years. And let me tell you, that's what happens. People miss the sign, they get involved in something, and they're stuck there for a long, long time. And so it takes a long time to break all these habits and stop them. But remember, for Christians, there's no, as somebody once said, there's no use in being so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. Yeah? We need to be real sometimes. In Mark chapter 7, when Jesus is dealing with the Pharisees and scribes, where is it there? There we go. In Mark chapter 7, when Jesus is dealing with the Pharisees and the scribes, and large crowds are following him everywhere, Jesus took time out. This is very, very important. He says Jesus left that place and went into the territory of Tyre and Sidon. He went into a house, not wanting anyone to know he was there. Let me ask you this. Do you ever get tired from people contact? Those who are full-time workers, will know exactly what I'm talking about. You get tired of people contact. It's draining, emotionally, spiritually, physically. It just drains you sometimes. And so what Jesus here, he had a bit of enough of people contact, and so wanted to hide them out. Take some time out and get away from it for a little bit. And there are times we too, as Christians, need to take a break. We need to give our bodies time to refuel. We need to have time for our minds to get active again. Because until we do, we're not going to be able to help to anybody. Because we're tired, constantly tired. And we do things like that, like you were talking about earlier, like going for a walk, take time out, have a game of golf, whatever it is, just some time out. And it's important that the addict does the same thing. He's no different. He needs time out from things around us. And so when you think about our lives just now, we're thinking, is that the time already? I've got like 10 minutes left, I've got to wrap all this up, sort of thing. You know, and we look at that and we say things like, doesn't time fly past? Time goes really, really fast. But Jesus took time out from all that. Even his disciples, I'm going to read that, but Mark chapter 6 verse 31 there, at the very end it said that, so they found the boat and started out for a lonely place. Why? They needed some time out. And basically Jesus is saying, let's go away and get a quiet spot here. Let's get some rest. Let's get some people rest. When's the last time you had an invitation for that? Let's go away and have some time out. It's good, isn't it? I wish somebody would call me up for a game of golf. That's a hint, by the way. Okay, number 5. Because we're really pushing time now. Be of service. Another great way to replace those negative things with positive things. When the Apostle Paul met up with the Ephesian elders in Acts chapter 20, he reminds them in verse 35 that it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. Now, when we think about giving, we usually just think about money and that, don't we? When Sunday morning, giving, no, it's money, money, money. That's all we ever think about sometimes. But we can give so much more than money, can't we? Let's get realistic with this. We can give of food, we can give of time. You've no idea how precious time is, especially these days. Give our time, we can give a lift back and forward to either transport, that sort of thing. Clothes, food, all these sort of things. So, we can give in so many different ways. Proverbs chapter 21, 25 to 26 says, the sluggard's craving will be the death of him, because his hand refused to work. All day long he craves for more, but the righteous give without sparing. So we give. And how do we give? Well, we encourage the addict to start giving. Whether it's time, food, clothes, whatever. Encourage them to give. Because the chances are, the addict has lived for me, myself and I for the last 18 years. It's all about him. My fix. I don't care how I get it, who I use, as long as I get there. This is totally reverse psychology. Getting them to think outside the box. Getting them to see the pleasure in what's given. And so when we can give secretly. Teach them that. That they can give without telling the whole world that they're giving. In a very quiet, personal way. Like Jesus says, Matthew 6:1, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of people in order to notice by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. So we give secretly. They'll be like, huh? Because they want the attention. They've always had the attention. Negative, but it's attention. Number 2, ask them to give generously. Again, 2 Corinthians 9:6, the person who sows sparingly will reap sparingly, and the person who sows generously will also reap generously. So ask them, give generously. That's the passage there. Number 3, encourage them to give purposely. Again, in verse 7 of 2 Corinthians 9, each of you must give what you've decided to do in your heart. So when we're giving, let's do it with a point behind it. Not just for the sake of I'm doing my Christian duty, but let's teach the addict right from the word go, even before they become a Christian, how they could give and give you those things. Give cheerfully. Again, verse 7 of 2 Corinthians 9, not with regret or under compulsion, since God loves a cheerful giver. And then finally, ask them to give sacrificially. Teach them that investing time and trusting God, that God is going to meet their needs. This is all happening before they're even Christians, by the way. Isn't that amazing? Grinding even before you get there. So, give sacrificially, give proportionately. Tell them to be common sense about it. There's no point in selling everything they've got to give to somebody that leave themselves with nothing. In the end, they're the ones that end up in need. So, get them to give proportionately. There we go. And that's the passage there. So, I said all that just to help you to think that when we talk about giving, we're not always talking about money, okay? We're not always talking about money. People give of their time, they give of their talents, they give of their material goods, their finances, not out of a sense of duty, or not because if I do this, God is going to bless me back type thing. We do it because we want to. We do it because it sets the example. And so we start off our prayers every morning, our daily prayers. And this is a good positive addiction. We spend time learning is a good positive addiction. We spend time in groups is a good positive addiction. We take time for ourselves is a good positive addiction, and we be of service to others is a good positive addiction. So you see how it's working?
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, is it? It's not rocket science. It's basically taking it, as long as you remember, keep it in the day. I want to finish up. I kind of hope these last three series lessons have been really useful and hopeful. I want to finish up by leaving you or sharing with you an interview that I did with a friend of mine who I knew when I was given this topic. I'm going to read the interview. I wanted to audio it so you could listen to it because it had a bit more impact, but they wanted to remain anonymous, which is fair enough. It's a good Christian friend of mine who's in the Lord's Church, and I'm sure you'll recognise all the principles we've been talking about for the last 3 sessions. So, let me go ahead, because this person is practising what we've been preaching, and believe me, it works with an addict. Okay. First of all, I asked the question: what was your life like before you realised you had a problem? Listen to this. She says, being brought up by an alcoholic parents was always dysfunctional. When life got tough, I never thought I wanted to drink, but I found that alcohol made me feel better. Well, for a while, she says. I always was discontented in everything, but I didn't understand why. I first started drinking when I went through a divorce. My friend came to stay with me and she introduced me to alcohol. She said it was great because it gave me confidence. But I didn't realise it was false confidence. It made me feel like everybody else feels, she says. I could be happy. I could be confident. I could be pretty. I could be funny. I could be all those things that she never felt. I went on and I said to her, at what point did you realise you had a problem? She says, when I started drinking, I became a completely different person. I was brought up with God in my life. My mum was a believer, and I was brought up with morals and standards. And very quickly, when I became an alcoholic, all of that went out the window. When I first picked up a drink, she thought, wow, I wouldn't normally behave like that. But she thought, well, I just had a drink, it's okay. She said she was in complete denial. But she thought it was alright, because everybody else was doing the same. I went on and I said to her, at what point did you realise you needed to do something about it? And she answered, I drank for 6 years, and there was times when I thought maybe I do have a problem. Maybe I'm like my mum. Maybe I am an alcoholic. And then I would justify to myself, she says, don't be daft. I don't drink enough to have a drink problem. And so, because she didn't drink a lot, she thought she couldn't be an alcoholic. And so she used to put it to the back of her mind. The first time she knew she really had a problem, she did something about it. In December 2000, she spoke to a family member who knew that would tell her the truth and wouldn't let her carry on the way she was going. And so she went along to her first meeting. She'd already been a Christian for a couple of years now by this time. And she turned her life around in so many different ways, but slowly she began to pick up the drink again. She says she couldn't understand why she was still drinking, even though she was a Christian. And so she justified it by saying, well, I'm only having a couple of glasses now, whereas before I'd have a lot. She said, I used to search through my Bible looking for anything that told me I couldn't drink. But I couldn't find anything. So I used to justify my drinking. And because I didn't drink like others did, and because I didn't drink like others, like I did before I became a Christian, I used to tell myself, that's okay. She says, God was in my life, God was in my heart. And I used to think I was absolutely pathetic and worthless because I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop drinking. I asked her, how long have you been going along with these support groups? You ready for this? She says, 11 years. But because I take it a day at a time, I need that support a day at a time to help me not drink. She goes, I go to these support groups to help other alcoholics too. And when somebody comes in for the first time to these meetings, they remind me of me, she says. She goes, I had absolutely no intention of becoming a Christian. But she says, people in the church just kept loving me. This is real. This is what she said. The people in the church kept loving me. They were just so nice to me for no reason whatsoever. And she says the amazing thing was they didn't want anything from me. She says Christianity and the support group went hand in hand for so many years. Finally I asked her, what advice would you give someone with an addiction of any kind? She said they need to ask themselves the question, do I really want to get well? Do I really want that help? She says, because if they don't, then everybody could put all their 10 pence worth into help, but you're wasting your time. It needs to come from them. She says, I would point them in the direction of the appropriate support group. She says, as a counsellor, I would say that people with addictions are lost. Their lives are in a mess. People see other people with addictions as bad, as dangerous, as horrible, as thieves, or whatever, because they've done some terrible things. She says, they're just human beings who somewhere along the line have become lost. She says, yes, they've done bad things, but that doesn't mean they're bad people. She said they need guidance, unconditional love, and help. Because without that help, many are going to end up dead. And just like Christians are afraid of junkies or alcoholics, junkies and alcoholics are also afraid of the Christians. That's interesting, isn't it? Let me leave you with the last words up here. She says this, the Christians are usually frightened because they don't understand the addict. But the addict is also frightened because they think the Christians are so saintly. I hope and pray that this has given you a little insight to some of the struggles that some people go through. but I hope and pray that you feel a little equipped to know that you can help. And you don't need a master's degree in this, that and the next thing. You can help in a very practical way, in a very straightforward way.